So let's talk about pardons. Because given what Jarod Kushner said he was doing in the final days of his father-in-law's administration, I suspect we're going to be hearing a lot more about pardons in the near future. And this might surprise you, but I have a feeling that much of what we learn is actually going to be good news on the justice front. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kushner here. So, did you see Jarod Kushner's videotaped testimony at the first public hearing of the J6 committee investigating the insurrection? Boy, it was damaging. And it was damaging not only to Donald Trump, but it was damaging to Jarod Kushner himself, actually for a couple of reasons. Here is the New York Times reporting about Jarod Kushner's testimony. Headline: Kushner said he thought White House counsel was whining when he spoke of resigning. And that article begins, Jarod Kushner, former President Donald J. Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, was featured prominently in videotaped testimony saying that he was engrossed in pushing through dozens of pardons at the end of the administration and dismissed threats of resigning by White House counsel as whining. The video showed Representative Liz Cheney asking Kushner about repeated threats to resign made by White House counsel Pat Cipollone over questionable conduct by Mr. Trump. Question from Cheney: Jarod, are you aware of instances where Pat Cipollone threatened to resign? Answer from Kushner: like I said, my interest at the time was on trying to get as many pardons done as possible, Mr. Kushner said. And I know him and the team were always saying, we're going to resign, we're not going to be there if this happened or if that happens, so I kind of took it up to be just whining, to be honest with you. You know, I know the New York Times went with the headline about how when the White House counsel threatened to resign, Jarod just sort of dismissed it as whining. I actually think there could have been an alternate headline for this story, and it could have read, Kushner reveals he was feverishly working on pardons at the end of Trump's term. So, yes, the clip of Kushner's testimony was offered for one reason. It was offered to show that when the White House counsel was threatening to resign because of Donald Trump's conduct of, trying to corruptly overturn the results of the presidential election, Kushner didn't have the time of day for it, just dismissed it as being whining because, he was busy with his nose in a pile of Trump pardons that he needed to get out before his father-in-law left office. And friends, it probably won't surprise you that within the Department of Justice, there's an office called the Office of the Pardon Attorney, where proposed pardons go through a formal and rigorous vetting process to see if the applicant is worthy of executive clemency, which is either commuting someone's sentence, which a president can do, reducing a sentence or wiping it away altogether, or granting a full pardon, which wipes away the conviction entirely. And law-abiding presidents and law-abiding presidential administrations go through the Office of the Pardon Attorney when a pardon is being considered, and it is put through that rigorous vetting process. Here's just a little bit of how the Office of the Pardon Attorney assesses possible pardons. Office of the Pardon Attorney. When the president proposes to exercise his or her executive clemency, in other words, a sentence commutation or a full pardon, the the case is directed to the Office of the Pardon Attorney for review. There are 5 standards that are applied. For example, the defendant, the person who ordinarily has been charged, convicted, and sentenced, must be in good standing during their sentence and must await a period of at least 5 years before applying for a pardon. Now, that can be waived, but there are other factors. One of the factors, the individual's acceptance of responsibility and self-awareness of how serious their actions were. Another factor, referrals and recommendations from people in powerful positions, like politicians, attorneys, judges, and even victims, are looked over carefully to decide if an individual is worthy of a pardon. And there are many other factors. I'll post a link in the description of this video to some information about the Office of the Pardon Attorney. But do you think this pile of pardons that Jarod Kushner was feverishly working to get out before his father-in-law left office were fully vetted through the Office of the Pardon Attorney? Did the Office of the Pardon Attorney even know anything about them? We're gonna hear more about this, I suspect, in the very near future. But let's not forget what we just learned from Kellyanne Conway, she of Alternative Facts. She published a book, which it looks like few people are purchasing, and in it, she revealed that Donald Trump ambled up to her at the end of his term and said, "Hey, honey," her word, she quotes Donald Trump as using, "Hey, honey, you want a pardon?" Here's the headline. Kellyanne Conway says Trump offered her a blanket pardon after the 2020 election, saying, "They go after everyone, honey." Do you think that unsolicited proposed blanket pardon to Kellyanne Conway, who maintains she committed no crime, so she didn't accept it, you think that was fully vetted through the Office of the Pardon Attorney? You think the Office of the Pardon Attorney even knew what Trump and his son-in-law Jarod were doing on the pardon front? And lest we forget some of the criminals and crooks and grifters and Trump co-conspirators that Donald Trump did pardon publicly that we know of, put a pin in that. Michael Flynn, Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Steve Bannon, Bernie Kerik, Michael Milk and George Papadopoulos, Elliot Broidy, Jarod Kushner's father, and so many others. So what else did we learn about pardons at the first public hearing? Well, we learned that several Republican members of Congress sought pardons from Donald Trump for their conduct on and around January 6th, for their criminal liability for the insurrection. Now, the only one who has been named thus far is Representative Scott Perry, asked for a pardon. I'm quite sure the other members of Congress will be revealed in future public hearings. But why is it important that these Republican members of Congress were seeking pardons from Donald Trump? Because it's all about consciousness of guilt. You only need a pardon if you know you've committed a crime and you need some help getting away with that crime from, the corrupt president for whom you were committing the crime in the first place. Consciousness of guilt. Frankly, I maintain that somebody who seeks out a pardon, who desperately needs a pardon, that is so incriminating that it's even better than a confession. Why do I say that? Well, let's take the hypothetical where somebody is arrested for their conduct. They are read their Miranda rights, they waive their Miranda rights, they agree to be interrogated, and ultimately during the interrogation they confess to the crime. What will the claim be at trial? The police forced me to confess. I didn't really commit the crime. They made me say I commit the crime. Well, when you're asking the president for a pardon for what you did on and around January 6th, nobody made you. Nobody coerced you. Nobody forced you to ask the president for a pardon. You did it of your own free will, born of your own knowledge that you committed a crime and you needed help from a corrupt president to get away with your crime. So it is powerful, powerful evidence of consciousness and of guilt and of the fact that you committed a crime on and around January 6th in connection with the insurrection. Let me take on one argument that I have often heard made when it comes to these sort of politically involved pardons. People will say, well, I only wanted a pardon because I thought the Democrats might try to corruptly prosecute me even though I didn't commit a crime. So I needed what I'll call a prophylactic pardon, just a safety pardon, because even though I didn't commit any crime, I thought the Dems might try to, prosecute me in some sort of a witch hunt. Okay, well, that dog won't hunt regarding that alleged witch hunt, and here's why. What would happen if prosecutors tried to introduce evidence that Scott Perry, Congressman Scott Perry, requested a pardon of Donald Trump for what he did on and around January 6th? Prosecutors would introduce that as consciousness of guilt evidence, evidence of his guilt. And Scott Perry's lawyer would probably move to suppress it or have it ruled inadmissible with that argument that I just made. No, I didn't do anything wrong. This isn't an indication that I did anything wrong. I wanted a prophylactic pardon in case the corrupt Dems came after me. Here's what a judge would rule every time. Here's what 10 judges out of 10 would rule, 100 judges out of 100 would rule. They would reject that argument by Congressman Perry's lawyers. And here's what they would say. They would say, that's a perfectly fine argument that you were requesting a pardon because you were afraid corrupt Dems were going to prosecute you even though you committed no crime. And that's an argument you get to make to the jury. Because, and here is a phrase that is often used and often heard in the criminal law, it goes to the weight of the evidence, not the admissibility of the evidence. So the prosecutors can introduce the fact that you requested a pardon from Donald Trump, and they can argue that's evidence of your guilt and your consciousness of guilt, and you get to argue, no, it wasn't. I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted it to be safe. You know what? I like the prosecutor's chance making that argument to a jury. And the other thing that I want to take on, but it's probably going to be in a future video, is this notion of pocket pardons. Now that we know Jarod had his nose in a pile of Trump pardons, signing away or preparing them for Trump to sign them all, he offered one to Kellyanne Conway unsolicited, even though she claims she committed no crime. You know, these pocket pardons are going to start to get pulled out when people are indicted for their crimes. And there are questions about whether these pocket pardons, my term, are lawful or not lawful or subject to legal challenges. And that's a conversation for another day. And I think I actually did a prior video about this precise issue some months ago. But let me just leave you with this. Those kind of pardons are absolutely challengeable in court. No guarantee a judge will strike them down. But it's kind of like a tree falling in the forest. If there's nobody there to hear it, does it make a noise? Well, if you pull out a corruptly delivered pocket pardon and there's nobody there to challenge it in court, is it legal? Is it illegal? We'll never know. That's why these corruptly delivered pardons must be challenged in court, and I predict they will be in the future, because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.